Welcome to SIGHTLINE Live, the podcast where we explore how live experiences can fuel year-round marketing. I'm your host, Marie-Elaine Lemire. In today's episode, we're joined by Benja Juster, lead creative producer of global events at Hubspot, whose career spans both worlds, producing large-scale experiences for global brands and building underground events that have attracted communities with little to no traditional marketing. Together, we'll explore the invisible architecture behind memorable experiences, creating emotional investment, fostering belonging, and generating the kind of organic momentum that no paid campaign can replicate. Benja, welcome to SIGHTLINE Live. So glad to see you today. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Benja, you are the lead creative producer of global events at Hubspot. Can you walk us through your journey to Hubspot and what initially pulled you into experiential and immersive work?
Sure. So I got really obsessed with immersive theater and the emerging DIY immersive art scene happening in the San Francisco Bay Area in the early 2010s. This is like during the rise of Sleep No More. Then She Fell had just come out. Meow Wolf had sort of just started creating some of their earlier work, and there was like analogous organizations in the Bay Area that I was involved in, and I ended up joining like a secret society cult game that got me really involved in that sort of work, and I eventually built an alternate reality game. So we were all creating this like derivative work. That's what led me and a couple friends to start throwing these sort of like immersive art parties. And we started building these experiences without really any sort of like playbook of what they were. And those evolved into now what is a nonprofit, a living, breathing giant organization. And people who worked at brands started coming to these events and seeing types of art and interactive experiences that they hadn't really seen anywhere else, like deeply immersive work that was highly participatory and used all of your senses and was really emerging in the art scene at that time. And so folks who were working at brands were coming to these events, and they eventually reached out to me as the creative director of them, being like, hey, how can we make cool stuff like this at our events? That's where I got my first foot in the door of learning about experiential marketing. That wasn't even something that I had fully understood to be a thing at the time. And that's what led me to working with brands. I got my first agency work and eventually went brand side.
That's amazing and very inspiring for the people who are working with more in the underground scene and wants to work with larger brands. How has your underground zero promotion experiences influenced or shaped your definition of what makes an experience truly powerful now that you work with brands?
I think it all comes back to first principles thinking for me in terms of how that relates to in real person experiences. I know what resonates most with me is that people want to connect with their bodies. They want to connect with their minds. They want to be intellectually stimulated and want to connect with each other. They want to feel part of something bigger. They want to grow their community. They want intimacy and friends. And we're in a loneliness epidemic. And I think in-person experiences are the antidote to that. And they also want agency of what they do when they choose to show up. They want to be part of the cultural fabric. They don't just want to absorb. And so I think that has always been the root of how I've looked at designing experiences, whether it be in the underground world or for the corporate client.
With SIGHTLINE, our audience is mainly brand marketers and experiential leaders. In your role as the lead creative producer, global events at Hubspot, what is your day-to-day like?
My day-to-day at HubSpot is really focused around translating business strategy and priorities into shared experiences. And how do we create experiences that showcase the power of HubSpot and also generate brand love through interactivity, through experiential storytelling, and also creating spaces for our users and community to be a part of the conversation and gather and help generate answers for each other and lead part of that conversation themselves. And so a lot of my work is really exciting. I'm absolutely obsessed with what I get to do on a day to day. It's creating spaces and experiences that support our users, our community in coming together and helping evolve what HubSpot is and learning how to use it to superpower their business.
Love what you do. Very interested in this conversation. You also founded Take Three Presents, a nonprofit focused on experiential art and community. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so Take Three is a nonprofit. We create immersive underground events that showcase emerging immersive art.
When you founded Take Three, what was missing in the commercial world that made you create something outside of it?
Well, I would say like when I first started making experiential art, the marketing industry was still at the point where it was like trading in event manager roles for experiential producer roles. And I never really previously saw myself in it. I was always in it for the art. And the way I discovered experiential marketing and that sort of storytelling was working on smaller projects. And I found that it was just this other format for storytelling, which I loved. And so for me, it was always about, hey, how do we create in person experiences that bring people together, inspire them with creativity and community and collaboration? And I found that working with brands as supporters of those stories and spaces, I was able to gather more people at a higher level and create more impact that way.
Amazing. And how would you define the event manager role versus the producer role?
Yeah, so no shade to event managers, but I think of an event manager as someone who's organizing a strictly logistics oriented slate of things that allow an event to come together. So whether that be catering or porta potties or security, line management, those sort of things. And as an experiential producer, especially on the creative side, where I pride myself is really being an experience designer and thinking about the entire attendee journey and how we want to strategize making them feel and connect with the story of the brand goals, and designing the experience as though it was my own house party, and really putting a lot of love and care and attention into the details, and also understanding what the cultural fabric is, what the cultural zeitgeist is, and having that experience connect to that and be in dialogue with it.
And now I really want to talk about your underground work because there's something really fascinating about building underground events that builds strong following, but also without the traditional marketing and promotion. What do you think create that organic pulse, or what does attract people in those underground events?
I think what attracts people in underground events is if an audience feels like an event is by them and for them, they'll inherently protect it and they'll also try to promote it. So that being said, community events aren't typically ever trying to sell you something aside from maybe like a ticket and some F&B and merch. So I think from a format perspective, they are inherently different than a brand experience. That being said, I think there's a lot of similar principles that experiential marketing events and experiences can incorporate and learn from how underground events foster community and how they generate what is essentially brand love, but at a different scale.
Most of the events that we see out there are promoted on social media and through marketing channels. How do you ensure that the right people know about your events? Do you want to walk us through the process of like getting people registered to it?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think first of all, like you said, the word registration, I think that is inherently the first step that a lot of people get to engage with your event or most events. But I think there's actually more opportunity before registration, before invitation. And that's breadcrumbing information about your event and in keeping a door ajar rather than shouting in a crowded room. So, how can you start creating whispers about what you're creating and building intrigue rather than just trying to sell a ticket as a first thing? Like no one wants to be sold to, right? It's an icky feeling. So how do you get people to come to your doorstep? And I think it's providing intrigue, value, meeting them in where they are, creating an unexpected story, giving them something that resonates with them, whether that be culturally in the zeitgeist or something that they can contribute to and relates to their superpowers or their skills. So I think the first step to creating intrigue within an event and breaking through the sort of like social media hype is getting people intrigued on their own. And then you were asking about the sort of like invitation process. I think thinking more broadly, a barrier of entry keeps people out who are there for the hype. And I think high quality experiences have this right combination of super catalysts, absorbers, and stabilizers, which if you're not familiar, a super catalyst is like that really charismatic person in the room at the house party who's keeping the conversation going, where the absorber is the person that's got like the wide stance. They're sewing the gap between getting people involved in the conversation. They're holding the space in the experience. And then the stabilizers, the people who might be more of like a wall dweller, someone hanging out on the periphery of an event, but are still there and contributing and being a part of the fabric of the experience. And I think when people show up for the hype because you did an excellent job spending a bunch of money on promotion, or you got an incredible headliner, or whatever it might be, you often get a room full of absorbers, which can feel like it sucks the room dry and the momentum comes to a screeching halt. And I think the real secret sauce is how do you get a room with the right balance of super catalysts, absorbers, and stabilizers.
It's so interesting, but that leads me to way more questions about this. But I want to be mindful because, of course, we're not going to name your events because they're meant to be underground. So no promotion. But do you think that mystery plays a role in how those events seems to be attractive for your community? And if so, is the mystery a risk as well to attract one type of people that are coming for the hype because there's mystery?
Absolutely. I think that's where you have to have like what I think of as an acculturation pipeline in place. We designed a platform called Secret Party, which is a ticketing platform that supports invitation only events. And it tracks the full hierarchy from the original people who were invited. So you can create essentially what is this acculturation pipeline. Like you as a attendee who does get a ticket only gets X amount of people you can invite. And then you're viewed as responsible for those people you invite, and it's your responsibility to acculture them. So that way we have a sort of we've sort of like passed the baton to the community to curate the events based on who we originally invited into the room. And that way we keep a high quality of attendee, and we also keep them informed. These aren't people who are showing up last minute to a masquerade without a mask, right? You want to make sure that people show up understanding what's expected of them, how they're going to engage in conversation in the room, what sort of experiences are there, and if it's within their realm of comfort or not, and if they're willing to stretch their comfort zone.
There seems to be a lot of focus on the invites and who you're inviting to the event. Do you think do you feel that curating who is in the room is more powerful than designing the event itself?
I think event design is inherently curating the room. I think by signaling who the event is for through the content, through the location, through the voice of the event, and the friction to get in, whether it's invite only or a high priced event, or there's an application to go to an event, you filter the room. I remember there's a festival called Form at Arco Santi in Arizona. And when it first launched, the only way to be able to go was you had to apply. You had to fill out an application. And it was a music festival. And the headliners were incredible, but it was very limited amount of people who could go. And instead of what they could have done is first come, first serve, they did an application model because they truly wanted to filter the types of people who are going to be at the event to create a really high bar, high quality attendee experience. And they don't do that anymore because what they did is they sort of like set the foundation of the type of attendee that they were looking to attract. And that became a self-generating snowball for them. So I think as experience creators, we don't constantly need to be filtering, but we do need to set the initial tone and allow that to build an acculturation snowball so that you're filling the room with the right people through whatever the filters are that help get you there.
It's literally what we're also looking for in the B2B space when we're planning events. You're also working on Unbound, the Hubspot major flagship event. Do you feel that it's the same type of strategy or process that you put in place for the invitation?
Absolutely. I mean, at HubSpot, at Unbound, we have an ideal customer profile, right? We have the types of people we want to get into the room. And throughout the design of the event, we're asking ourselves, does this experience that we're designing appeal to this type of person? And or would this help push a person slightly out of their comfort zone and actually get them to try something new and create a formative experience there? Because you don't always want to meet your attendees exactly where they are, right? People come to in-person experiences often to stretch their comfort zone a little bit. So can we get a C-suite executive to play, jump around, move? Like, is that possible in front of their colleagues? Like, I think that's a question I often ask myself. What level of play and interactivity can we get a top level executive to engage within? And I think a lot of that comes back to creating containers that feel supportive. And obviously, like, the brand and the event has to have the credibility to get the person in the room to begin with. But what I've found from doing C-suite events and experiences is there is actually a outsized desire for executives to do interactive experiences than we tend to give them credit for. And they spend most of their days in very buttoned up rooms and very cut and dry experiences that if you can build the bridge to something that's a bit more experiential, a bit more interactive, they'll cross that bridge.
Do you feel there's a risk when we try to do that? Because I feel like all the marketers were all hoping to see those executives playing pickleballs or being involved in those creative activities. But it's also scary when we're organizing those type of rooms because we don't necessarily know how those folks are going to react. Everybody has their own personality. If you don't know personally your guests, how do you know it's going to be received well? So do you feel like there's a risk?
Absolutely. And I think old adage with no risk, no reward. But I think the worst thing that we can do as experiential marketers is design something for mediocrity. It's a shame to spend hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on an event that no one remembers. That's mediocrity, right? And that's unfortunately, I think, the baseline of where a lot of events land. And I think it's up to us to hold ourselves to a higher standard and take the risks. And I'd rather fail forward and design an experience that doesn't resonate but still generates some buzz than generate something that feels really generic and no one even thinks about on the plane ride on the way home.
What's the backup plan if ever it doesn't go as well as you planned?
I think we are always still designing something for everyone. There's always an escape hatch, right? Like, we might have an activation that's a 9 out of 10 creative, interactive experience. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be a networking lounge with some coffee if you need to resort to that.
Totally. You've worked also on large scale participatory formats like TwitchCon. The word participatory is always a challenge for me. TwitchCon hosts more than 10,000 attendees. Why do most events still underuse their audiences? And how do you think about shifting people from passive attendance to active participation, like we just mentioned with the executive?
I think there's a huge opportunity for attendees to be an active part of the conversation of any event. And I think technology has only made that easier. Event tech has really allowed us to all essentially have a voice, whether that be through our phone or our badge or whatever it may be, to help drive the narrative of the event. I think it often comes down to a combination of risk and resources. Think of it as like a choose your own adventure book when you're including audience interaction, right? So you have to spend that much more time developing content that has multiple forks that might not get used. So I think oftentimes teams are short on that. But I think if you're going to optimize for something, it is designing, whether it be keynotes or gamified experiences or personalized activations that are responsive to the audience's need and dialogue. Because I think when people feel like they're part of the conversation, the event feels like it's by them and for them, rather than something that's just being projected by them or projected at them. And a principle that I always come back to is how do we turn audiences into participants? Because a participant is going to be an active member, an active contributor to the dialogue and also the content of an event. As a top-down experience designer, you can only generate so much content as your team and time and budget has. But if everybody has a mini platform to help generate content, look at Braindate as a great example of that. We basically open up Pandora's box in terms of how much we can include at an event. And I think that's where the magic is. I want to leave an event or an experience feeling like I never found the boundaries or the edges of it. That to me, even if it was one step further, if I didn't get there, my imagination will tell me that there was an infinite amount of content and I can't wait to come back next year and find out what I missed this year. And so I think it's up to us to create pathways for our audiences to participate effectively in offering their brilliance, their unique perspective at our event, and also drive the sort of like parent narrative that we have all co-created together as well.
Making your audience becoming contributors is really key. I agree with that. When you move between underground work and corporate briefs, what do you make sure never gets lost in translation? Do you have a top 3 things that you feel like, not that you're replicating, but that you make sure that happens during the process?
I'd say the top 3 things that I focus on, whether it be at an underground event or a corporate event, comes back to your last question. It's agency, giving the audience agency. So whether it be at an art party or at a B2B dining experience, still ensuring that the audience has some say in the outcome of the experience, giving them an objective. I think people always need to know why they're in the room, right? And so are you in the room to learn? Are you in the room to connect? Are you in the room to upskill? And ensuring that's really clear so people know what their track is and how to engage in the space. So now they have a voice, they have a trajectory. And I think the third thing I'm always looking to bring into events and experiences is how do they have a dialogue with the broader cultural context that they're inherently participating in. Because as gatherers and as experience creators, we are inherently a part of a cultural conversation. So if I'm going to create an experience that is focused on play and interactivity, I'm tapping into a whole other cultural conversation about that. And I want to make sure that I'm acknowledging the thought leaders or the artists or the curators who are driving those conversations and not just taking from it. So yeah, being an active contributor to that.
So between underground or more consumer focused experience and B2B experiences, do you feel that one or the other is harder to build engagement with the audience?
I think it's definitely harder to build engagement in a B2B experience, but a lot of it I think comes down to brand credibility. Because at an underground event, as I mentioned, like you're not trying to sell anyone on anything. So as soon as people are in the room, they've already bought into whatever you're selling, an idea of an experience. Oftentimes, B2B experiences have a KPI that is beyond brand love. And so I think at that point, you're really relying on your brand credibility, right? And that's you do what you say, you're building trust, and you have the ability to deliver, which is your expertise. And so I think that is what you really need to lean into within a B2B event, that an underground event doesn't really need to incorporate as much in the design, which adds that much more of a layer of complexity to the event design.
You mentioned a couple times brand love during this conversation, and you have Unbound coming up. How do you measure brand love with a B2B brand like Unbound?
I think we measure brand love at Unbound through a number of different KPIs, and that includes qualitative feedback through customer interviews, social listening, also overall in-person attendance, but NPS as sort of like the primary health signal overall. And I'm always looking to see how many people come back year over year, because coming back to your acculturation question, I think having repeat attendees allows an event like Lore vibe to continue growing and evolving year over year.
Amazing. And how do you balance artistic integrity with the realities of scale when brands enter the equation? Like for a big brand, do you have to stay on brand, but you want to be artistic as well and creative? How do you balance both?
Every brand is drastically different. The flexibility of a brand to stretch beyond its brand guidelines is really dependent on the brand itself. For instance, at Apple, brand guidelines are extremely strict, and the ways that the brand is willing to stretch are very confined. Versus at HubSpot, we just rebranded Inbound to Unbound. We have a whole new brand guideline for this year, and it's kind of up to us to co-create and evolve it and bring it to life. So there's a huge opportunity there to really understand what it's going to grow and look like. So might not be a great answer, but it is really dependent on the foundation of what the brand is willing to explore in how the brand guideline is designed.
For a creative mind like you, is it a challenge to kind of stay within those guidelines when you work for a larger brand? Or is it part of the excitement of, having a different challenge of like being more creative, like when you have less budget, right? You need to be more creative. With guidelines, you need to be kind of more creative without going into something crazy out of the box. Or
Absolutely. I think brand guidelines are a form of constraint, and constraints breed the best art. With underground events, our constraint isn't a brand guideline, it's budget. So we get really scrappy. We're talking duct tape and chewing gum, right? And it's similarly, but transposed to brand guidelines. How can you get really creative within the confines of the brand guideline? And I think I've seen some of the best experiential marketing examples by trying to find ways to really push a brand to the edge. I really love A&W, fast food restaurant, recently did Smash Burger release, and they did an activation where they smashed a restaurant down, one of their A&W restaurants, down into a really thin profile, and they changed every single touch point within the store to make it compressed. The point of sale systems, the trays, the napkins, everything, right? So they still worked really strictly within the brand guidelines. They didn't get to explore a whole new identity, but they were able to really stretch it or compress it and make it feel really special and unique because people had come to understand and expect it to look and feel a certain way.
So creative. And what do you think of the experiential industry right now? Do you think there's something still misunderstood about authenticity and what makes something really meaningful?
I think the biggest thing that's misunderstood about the experiential agency right now is that we're still a little bit stuck in the Instagram museum and the photo moment era of the industry. And I think we're struggling to fully transition into what's known as the transformation economy and how we can actually add real value to people's lives through interactive experiences, through community gathering, through personal and creative exploration. And I think a lot of that has to do with having the right creative minds in the room and also the appetite for risk. So I think that's sort of where we're coming up against in terms of the friction of the experiential agency that I'd like to see us continue pushing forward.
We want real value, as you said. This leads us to our lightning round. So this part of the podcast conversation, I'm going to ask you quick questions. You just answer with your spontaneous answer, no overthinking. Are you ready for that?
Let's do it.
Okay, one experiential trend that feels overhyped right now.
Swag, merch. I think stop buying your customers' love and start driving real value.
A city with the most interesting underground creative energy today.
I mean, Los Angeles, it's where I live. I feel like there's a huge amount of emerging creative energy here right now, especially with the transition of the film industry. And there's so many incredible artists and underground worlds that are bubbling up to the top right now.
an event that changed your standards for live experiences.
In the B2B space, I'd say C2 Montreal really pushed what I thought was possible in terms of gathering and conference style environments. And in terms of more art-driven experiences, I think the OG that I mentioned, like Sleep No More, Then She Fell, these sort of like immersive theater forefathers have set the standard for me.
I don't know if you said C2 because I live here in Montreal, but I love it. Thank you.
Shout out Montreal.
What's more powerful in experiential, surprise or belonging?
Definitely belonging.
Hmm.
I think surprise is instantaneous and it's a moment and it's similar to spectacle. There's like a wow, but I think belonging is something that sticks with you and stays with you.
Totally agree. And finish this sentence. The best experiences don't just entertain people, they
Connect people.
love it. It was so great to have you on SIGHTLINE Live. I have one question for you, one last one. So for the marketers in our audience who wants to build a underground cultural experience today with zero paid promotion, where would you start? 3 things.
I think there's too high of a bar right now in community society for what gathering can look like. And I think start small and think local and pick one of your passions and make it a low barrier of entry and just get people to come over and hang out and see what can evolve from there.
Love it. Small, local, passion, bring people together. Thank you so much, Benja. It was such a pleasure to have you on SIGHTLINE Live, and I can't wait for our next conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.